I am back. Hello, hello, hello. I will not waste your time. I am Kristen Nicole Mann, and I help Black women find their true authenticity through creativity, all things creativity. So I just want to introduce myself. But first things first, so like and subscribe to my YouTube channel that I have not been on for a while. My mom came and visited me, so I wanted to dedicate my full attention to my visitor. So that's been fun. She's been here a couple of days. She just left uh, today, this morning. So I have some time before a meeting. I'm really pushing it because I only have maybe about 15 minutes. So we're going to try to cram my thoughts on this topic as best as I can. So, real quick, let me make sure I'm on actual live because sometimes this platform won't tell you or you won't see yourself. Okay, so I am. Um, Let me just make sure. Okay, so I'm going to start with this topic from woke to broke, navigating the impact of social movements on business. So this is a small business conversation, and I have been reflecting upon this conversation for the past couple of days, and I just wanted to do a quick little video about it because. As you know or don't know, I do not have a job, an actual job with a company. I am an entrepreneur. So I would fall under the small business aspect. Um, I paint, obviously, I sell my original artwork, and then I help teach children and adults how to paint, or I come into different companies, nonprofits, and I help them with like building, team building activities. I help with children team building, them having a social aspect, all kinds of great things. But what that helps me do is stay on top of anything pertaining to entrepreneurship, because I think if you step into that realm, you need to also make sure you're up to date with some of the things that are going on, specifically in your country, that you want to just be aware of. You don't have to know everything, but you just want to be aware of it. And I have been talking about a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how they've been cutting some of the positions, the programs, the funding. In some states, everyone hasn't caught up yet, but it has been a grand conversation when it comes to specifically magazines like Forbes and all the money magazines. So when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I really encourage you to research that, look it up yourself. And it was for us to champion, or people to champion diverse type of programs to be in schools, businesses, you name it. And that is just the kindergarten version of what DEI was and is. And so right now it is an interesting time in this country because they are cutting this aspect from a lot of tables. They're no longer wanting to fund it. Governors are signing bills to have it be completely depleted by October. So there's a lot going on around this. And it had me thinking, because I came across a lot of articles pertaining to this, but this one article and this one conversation I saw on YouTube, one of my favorite channels. If I find it, I'll link it. It had me pose the question: when you go woke as a business, Does that hinder your business? Do you go broke per se when you are putting a social movement at the forefront of your business? Because being in business is risky already. That's a risky thing. You're taking um, a chance on yourself. You're betting on yourself. And so when you have that, you are already putting yourself in a different scenario than your peers, because your peers could be working in corporate, all of them, and they don't have to worry about taking taxes out of their check. They don't have to worry about paying people. They don't have to worry about anything else but their job. And so when you jump into entrepreneurship, all of your why, what are you doing this for? What is your mission? What is your goal? What is something that is near and dear to your heart that you would like to invest in? All of these things we have to think about as business people. And sometimes, I've seen personally people jump into the business aspect and only think about the money part, which is good, but what are you going to do with your money, which falls under management? And that is sometimes not thought of, because we are excited. We're in our purpose, blah, 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 whatever talk people are saying. And we sometimes forget that a lot of times social movements come out during your time period of being an entrepreneur. There are political things going on all the time. For instance, when I first started painting professionally, like painting original artwork pieces, right at the time, I remember Sandra Bland, all of that was going on with, Black Lives Matter just had probably started not too long before that. So there was a lot of talk about, Black people in general getting treated not properly by police. Police brutality was a huge, huge thing. And so at the time, there were conversational pieces that I created in order to, it really propelled my career in art, because I might have not been on the forefront as like protesting, but I was able to create these pieces that started conversation. And it was a really high time, and I don't regret it at all. But the one interesting experience I had with another kind of Black Lives Matter affiliated thing that completely was misunderstood. uh, it was a street mural that I was able to do within the city that I reside in. And, it was during the George Floyd. And at that time, I remember I was getting a lot of, news. People were contacting me about other things that had happened identical to George Floyd. There was another man in Rochester that had died because of some police brutality. So this conversation was starting up all over again. And so, me doing such a big project like that, it really created a spotlight that whether I wanted it or not. And after the fact, though, after doing all of that and championing for a social movement, I found myself like alone. And this is gonna probably be surprising to people, because when you do things like what I just described, you would think that it's going to be a consistent or a constant conversation, constant people around, constant, people wanting to do more, more, more. But it really wasn't like that. And I'm not saying that it wasn't a good time, because it was, but it was almost what I can describe as like everybody left. And I was stuck with the conversation of me having to have to myself about, okay, what's next? And it was exhausting. I actually was exhausted after that huge major project that you would think would be definitely life changing, but it was to an extent. And I say that, carefully, because I don't want people to think that I wasn't grateful for the process and I wasn't grateful for what it did, because it did make a statement. But at the same time, I was getting a lot of heat from various people. There were people that liked it. There were people that didn't like it. There were people that stopped talking to me. There were people that, got to know me through that. So a lot was going on, but I did learn a major lesson with this whole from woke to broke thing, and like navigating the impact of a social movement. Because after that, I really had to navigate what was my next steps, what were my next steps. And it was difficult. It was really difficult because now that I had the language for it, I can clearly explain what was going on. Everything happened fast. There was a lot of trauma mixed in with that, because during that time I did get a lot of death threats from people that lived where I lived. And, a lot of people turned their back. So that could be traumatic in a sense, without you even knowing. And then there were, times where you felt like it wasn't going to happen, just because you have literally the local government fighting you on an art project. That's all that I kept calling it. And they didn't see it that way, because um the connotation of what Black Lives Matter represented was nothing that I personally represented in my personal life. I wasn't really doing it to be a part of the organization. I was doing it because of the words were powerful to me. And so unfortunately, that didn't matter to people. That just was like, that went completely over their head, and they were just like, you're part of this organization. I don't want you in my church. I don't want you in my establishment. I don't want, there was whispers, what is she going to start, something in my, coffee shop. It was just like, it was really interesting, because it was a good time in my life, but then I had to worry about other things pertaining to, what happened around it, and who wasn't here for me no longer and who was, and it just got real confusing. And so when it comes to the from woke to broke, and seeing this all come up again, because there are still things happening, whether you want to admit it or not, there's still discriminations happening towards the African American race. And it's not to sound like a victim, but there are things still that are targeting us by default, such as the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so when you take that away, and you have people wanting to champion, what is going to happen with the diversity aspect, they now call it inclusion only. They drop the diversity, and they're like, this is inclusive. Whatever you do that falls under the diversity sphere is no longer diversity and inclusion, it's inclusive. And so, you get to a point where you're like, every single thing is like stripped from us in some shape or form. And as I said on one of my past videos, um, Black women are at the forefront of this whole movement. But this also makes me question, like, is it making our businesses lack in, number one, understanding? Do people really understand our missions? Are we clear? Are we thorough when it comes to being a Black business owner? Second thing, are we understanding the language of money? Because there was a lot of money pushed when it came to the diversity, equity, and inclusion. There was a lot of money pushed during the George Floyd. You know, that's really what made diversity, equity, and inclusion something that people looked into because of the George Floyd aspect. But what happened was they didn't look completely into the fine print of all of what was going on. And sometimes we get excited as a community and we're like, yes, we're going to have this all the time. And then it ends up drying up, like now, like they want to cut it. And it's like now we have to move forward and think about our next steps. And this is something that I've been kind of like pondering for the last 7 days per se, because you don't want to just jump out there and make an assumption that, oh, everybody doesn't understand, they don't get it. You know, you don't want to jump out there and say that, but you do want to make sure that you are aware of what's going on. And I just want to pull this up. So the woke to broke hold, there's it's a slogan. And I first heard this probably in, I want to say I started hearing it heavily during the pandemic, because there were major companies that were not for adding DEI anything to their company because they wanted to just keep it as a business. And once you mix politics with business, it does become a slippery slope. It does get messy. And most of the time, you do not have time to be running a huge Fortune 500 company and worrying about, you know, what is going on politically to the extent of adding, you know, things that aren't supposed to mesh. And so the phrase is then interpreted as a reference to companies that engage in politically correct activities as part of their corporate strategy. So diversity, equity, and inclusion was a strategy for a lot of corporate companies, as we saw over the pandemic. They gave money to it, a portion of their sales to diversity, equity, inclusion, because the world watched George Floyd and his situation. And so there was action that was taken. But then we're here in 2024 and businesses are really coming to that crossroads of, is this helping our company or is it hindering our company? Because we're more worried about the social movement and not really worried about what is happening business wise. And these are things that, you know, everyone's not going to take a look at because everyone's not an entrepreneur. Everyone doesn't understand the in and outs of what you need in order to run a company. They don't understand the strategy of management when it comes to running your company. And if you go one way or be one-sided, you're going to miss out on something either way, whether you are for social movements or whether you're not. And there were a lot of companies that didn't bring on any type of diversity, equity, and inclusion because they felt their company represented an equal playing field when it came to different cultures, diversity. Like they felt they had, you know, enough going on to where no one felt uncomfortable about being in the company or working positions or anything like that. And so that is okay though. But they got a lot of backlash as well because they were questioned. There was one political candidate, I can't remember his name. He dropped out and he was younger. He was on the young side of, you know, he's closer to my age and he runs this huge company. And he was like, we didn't bring that on board because I just didn't feel like I didn't have, you know, diversity in my company already. I already was hiring all different types of cultures and everything. So he went on the Breakfast Club I'm gonna try to find his name because that was a good example of he was a Republican. Or no, was he independent? Let me see if I can find his name. Candidates for 2024. I'll find it later. Oh, it was Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy. I can't bring up his picture, but this is who it was. So he has a company and he said he didn't feel the need to bring that on. But you know, when it comes to this conversation, there's a lot that it could go left or right. But let me bring up what woke means in case people don't understand what that is. Okay. Okay. Let me bring that up, this definition. Okay, so woke means being conscious of racial discrimination in society and other forms of oppression and injustice in mainstream use. Woke can also more generally describe someone or something as being with it. It was supposed to say with it. But yeah, so that's we've seen this term time and time again. But here are some of the companies that did not go or cut DEI recently. I want you to see this because this was pretty interesting. So these are the companies that recently cut DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Zoom, Snap, Meta, Tesla, DoorDash, Lyft, Home Depot, and Wayfair cut. These companies recently cut those programs or those departments. And the interesting part is they reduced by 50% or more of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then you have this projection, which it would make it seem like people would keep it, but they're not. The global market for DEI is projected to hit 15.4 billion by 2026. Yet, even with all that investment, 65% of employees do not uh, believe their organizations embrace diversity and inclusion. And so you have to question, okay, are people changing the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or are they keeping it the same? Is it expanding from what, it used to be viewed as? Because I'm like, if it's projecting to hit 15.4 billion by 2026, it doesn't mean they're completely scrapping it, but they may be scrapping it in the way that we used to know. And of course, I'll come on here and continue this conversation, but I just thought it was interesting that, you probably look at my past videos and you probably think that I'm for all, one side, but I'm not. I just like to bring the awareness to these type of conversations because uh we need to know. And there are social movements created every single day. And if we are not aware of the decisions that are being made from the top down, um, then you'll be out the loop on a lot of things. And my suggestion to anyone in a business position or thinking about getting into entrepreneurship, I would look into your local area. Like, what does your local government put at the top of their budget in order to get done, like accomplish? What are they allocating most of their money to? Because that's going to affect you. If you live in a rural town, rural, I can't even say it, rural, rural town, uh, you might live somewhere that they put agriculture at the top of their budgets. You might live somewhere where they put police at the top of their budget. You might live somewhere where they put um, getting the streets done at the top of their budget. But you want to know what is allocated for what you do. So if you have a business that advocates for agriculture and not processed foods, this is just an example, and your town or your city or your area, they put aside a huge budget for agriculture, you might want to go to some of those meetings because again, the whole DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation is changing, is shifting. There's money going to different things, and you may have to be put in a position to foot the bill yourself, or you get people to support in a way where you're keeping them engaged in what you're doing, and you just might have to ask them to donate because we don't know what could happen from day to day. You might wake up and they say there's no more grants for what you do. Um, and these are things to think about. These are things that, as a business owner, we just have to go over. If you're not, you don't really care about local, then that suggestion is not for you. If you're global, like behind me, like my new page, if you're global, then you want to think about what's globally happening. What's the exchange like? Is it still a free market? If it, how much is the tariffs? What's the taxes of stuff now? If you feel like you're out, you want to serve, outside of the United States, you have to look at all that because things are changing rapidly. And so I will let you go, but I hope that you got something out of this little live talk. You can again subscribe to my YouTube channel, Kristen Nicole Mann, and you also can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, all under Kristen Nicole Mann. They're all across the board. And I will continue to do my due diligence of keeping you up to date with what's going on. But really pose the question to yourself, is going woke keeping me broke? You got to be honest with yourself. Are you just going to, have something else that you lead with? What is the mission? Who do you want to give back to? What is the purpose? And then go from there. But it was great talking to you all today. You can visit my website, www.kristennicoleman.com. I do have art prints. I have custom, where you can get custom anything. I also have some pieces of artwork left, but I will talk to you all later. Bye.